Well, let's talk about how we can help one another. This is an opportunity for us to ask questions, answer questions, share our thoughts, and as we go into the new year, things that you might want to take a list of the things to start to put down. What have I got to do? Look to see what projects need to be accomplished. And the first thing, and I'll kick it off here with a few things. For instance, how to get good customer service. This seems to be a real problem this week and next because many of the manufacturers are closed and things are a little slower. But if you're off the air, most of them will attend to you. But you need to have certain things at your fingertips. Your phone number, the phone number of your company that you're calling, in name of somebody if you know who you're calling, the unit number, the serial and model, the call sign and location of the station, the software version. Yeah, so much is running off firmware, isn't it? And if you're dealing with a local utility, not only just the street address, but the numbers on the nearest utility pole. And not only that, but I'm finding here, at least in this area, that you need to have the account number and you need to have a list of allowable callers. I went down to resolve a problem with the internet provider at one station, and the internet wasn't working. It wasn't there. And I called their service and I said, I'm here at this address. And, well, do you have authority to call us? And this is something that I have privacy laws and all that sort of stuff. I understand, but, this is a little ridiculous. But that's what the way things are now.
Hey, Barry.
Yep.
One of the things, at least in Central Texas, on electric outages and stuff, you need to get them to respond, you need the bill, because the bill will show where they think the service is, even if that's not where you would call it. The service address is not necessarily the road that you go to. The other thing you need, besides the account number and the permission to act on behalf of the account person, is the number on the meter. All of the meter numbers have a magic, about a 20-digit string. And that's really, at least here, if you can read them that number, they can find it. I tell them this meter has no energy, and they go, oh, okay, let me look. All the other stuff is just, ancillary, but they won't talk to you if you're not an authorized person.
And so that might be the number one issue for some folks in the new year, is to speak with your GM and make sure
get it all ironed out ahead of time.
Yep, utilities, power company.
Hey, Barry, one thing that has gotten me a few times is, because I'm dealing with a few corporations, where the billing address of the account is, because like I'm working here in New York and I'm finding out my billing address is in San Antonio, Texas. And it was after hours. I needed to order a part, and boy, was that a problem.
Yeah, could be. So all these things are important to have. And again, as I say, if you've had contact with this company before, it's always good to know, the trouble ticket number or whatever contact number sort of thing that they have, and the name of the tech you talk to. This is, I don't know why it's like a 9-digit number, which more atoms than there are in the universe, but that's what they do. Anyway, here's a question, and I'll ask everybody if you have a thought here. What do you use to contact your facilities when you're away? Now, a lot of people have said that they're tired of the hassles with TeamViewer, and some of them have moved on to AnyDesk. I've heard about Aero Admin and AMI Admin. Could I hear from some of you? Press your spacebar or alternate A and tell us what you're using to connect up with your gear.
I've been happy with Remote PC for a while. I have the 10 PC version.
The remote desktop connection, you mean?
No, it's called Remote PC.
Okay.
It's subscription based, and the lowest tier I think was the 10 PCs, and it's always been reliable and easy to put on a client's computer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the two criteria. Easy to get on there. I think I mentioned last week or the week before that dealt with a station where the IT department had the thing so locked down they couldn't even download AnyDesk, much less install it.
Google makes one also, but I haven't used it in about a year. But that's free.
As is remote desktop connection, although a lot of people think that that's not very secure.
Well, and it's not included if you encounter a Windows PC that is a home version.
Yes, that's right.
So if you have a home version as your computer, the one at the office might have that capability, but you don't have it on your home version. That's just one of those things.
I've been very lucky with AnyDesk. The price is right, and I have a number of clients, and I've noticed that the firewall and IT departments of different companies don't deal with it because it's such a small company, so they don't block it.
Do you have a license from them, or do you use the free version?
I've used both. What was it? Around 8 months ago, I helped you out with AnyDesk. Even I find it very reliable, and the nice thing about AnyDesk is they ask you right out, do you need the audio signal coming through as well, and that helps out a lot.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
How do you use AnyDesk if you're not there?
You can set it up to automatically load and just write down the number, or you can have someone there acting as a gatekeeper. I always use it as with someone approving it because it just gives me credibility that I'm asking permission to get onto their machines, and it works. And it also does the one thing that's really great. When my relatives ask me to help them with a computer problem, I don't have to go see them. I can just go on the computer, do it, and not have to deal with them.
Well, that's a good point. We've
been using
to come back to my machines here at the house when I'm out, and it just automatically logs in for me. But anybody else, and I think you can lock out anybody, but the ones that you want. It's fairly nice, but if you cross them and they think you're doing too much commercially, they're going to lock you out or demand money.
Internally, we use Real VNC, and that one has worked out real well for us because you can get in with your cell phone as well and do things.
Tim, is that a subscription base or is that a free one?
It's free.
Open source?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and having it on your cell phone is great. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that I've, been able to do things while I'm out shopping with my wife or something, which is super nice. She really likes it because it means I don't have to rush back to the station for something.
Does it require?
Real VNC is really great, and it's also compatible with Tight VNC and Ultra VNC, so you have multiple ways of using it.
Correct.
Does that do the same thing we just talked about with AnyDesk at the other end? It just accepts your call?
Correct. You have
there's a server and a viewer.
Interesting.
We use VNC with a virtual private network to get to things that we need to look at the desktop on. A lot of things just get done with a command line tool. Like
we're going to talk more about VPNs and things like that next month. In fact, we're going to have one day on firewalls, we're going to have one day on open source apps, and we're going to have a day on the Star NIX, the different Linux flavors and how you can get onto one, whether you want to do it for the Rivendell or your other purposes, or you want to just experiment and learn it. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time in January on IT things like that. So
there is one problem with VNC, and a lot of IT departments will tell you that it is not secure at all. I love VNC inside the network where I can go when I'm in the building, but there is no security on it. So I wouldn't recommend it going outside your building with it.
Yeah, that's why we use it over a VPN.
AnyDesk will also work with on your cell phone.
Yes, and it has saved me a lot of times.
well, good.
So you're just handing your credentials off to a third party, and we don't all know how safe those are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, one of the things that third party, one of the things that I think is most important, and one of the reasons we're here today, I think, is that community is good. Sharing our knowledge, our experience is good. It helps everybody. And I'd like to take just a moment to ask for something. And if you're like me, you've had enough in terms of subscriptions to different things. But one of the things I'd like to recommend is if you go to the YouTube here and you go to the BDR net channel, which should be on your screens right now, the BDR net, no dot. And all our videos are up here right now, including the live right now, our live, and we've got people watching it now. But there's another factor here that I would like to recommend if you don't mind and feel that it won't affect you in the wrong way. And that is, there's a little button down here to subscribe. Now, it doesn't bring you lots of email. It doesn't bring you flooding your inbox or anything like that. It just adds to the number of subscribers we have, which we're just under 400 right now, 386. And if we get to 1,000, now what can I tell you? If we ever do get to 1,000, I guess we get some pennies from Google and YouTube. And what I'll do is I'll give that right back to the group. We'll do some door prizes each week, and either some gift cards or things like that. And so I'd just like to encourage you, if you have a moment, go. You can actually, there's a little bell that'll come up after you subscribe to let you get a notice of when a video is posted or we start our weekly show. But you don't have to do that. Just subscribe, and that's good. Now let me turn back to our community attitude here for just a moment. And have you ever had trouble with your cell phone? Not talking to your remote control, or have you had hassle with Gmail? And especially having a remote control system or an IP system try to send you a warning thing, or an issue that no one knows how to fix. Well, that's what we want to do. How do you pick a tower crew, a good tower crew? So again, the floor is open, and I'm not going to sit here and pontificate all the time, but I will say that the number of folks that I see here, even those that don't have their camera turned on, represent a great deal of knowledge, interest, experience, and we can share these things. And for instance, I got a note from one of the folks about a friend who worked for AT&T Cellular commenting that the DTMF is generated, according to him, at the far end, not in your handset. And so the question is not so much whether it's your cell phone that's working or not, it's the connection through AT&T or Verizon or whoever. But the acoustical generators that we used to use, they don't seem to work on modern cellular networks anymore.
Yeah, and I ran some tests this week after we talked using both Verizon and AT&T, but on the same handset. Mixed results. It really seems to depend more on what the service is at the tower site. And I had access to 4 different remote controls still on POTS lines. I will say the SciCon at one particular site answers everything. It doesn't care. the DTMF can be pretty bad, and it still responds, correctly. The Burke remote controls are much pickier.
Yeah, if the handsets, telephone sets that are VoIP and cellular sets, they really don't send tones anymore.
No, it's all data.
They send a packet.
Somewhere at the distant end network, there is a tone generator that you're controlling with your data stream. Is how it works. And so you have no control over the twist and the level of it. The only trick you can control is there's usually a side tone generated in your handset, so you can tell when you're pressing the button. And if you turn off your mic or use a headset, you can minimize that acoustic coupling and getting it out of phase. Local tone mixed with the one generated down the line. Sometimes that helps.
So the bottom line, the thing to remember is if you're having a trouble and you call the phone company, first of all, you're going to be a frontline person and you're not going to get any straight answers.
No, they won't know anything about it.
And when they tell you that it's probably your phone, they're wrong.
Yes, well, but they don't know any better.
If you have a POTS connection, so there isn't any more analog telephone. Anybody who thinks that they're getting a POTS connection because it's better than VoIP, that ship has kind of sailed. It's all VoIP in the public network. So if you push a button on your cell phone and there's an analog, POTS line at the other end, the thing that is making that tone is a translator in the telephone company office.
Yes, correct.
It's connected to your line, and you push the button and it goes bleep, and it does it for a specific amount of time. You have no control of that. If your remote device likes tones that have to be this long and have this much distortion, and then there's nothing you can do about it.
No, all of the above. The only thing you can do occasionally, at one office, I have a relatively new AT&T VoIP service, and they call it an ATA, an analog terminal adapter, a little box. Yeah. And if you're going to put that and use it with an analog fax machine, there are some settings you can tweak that improve the performance of the fax modem, sort of. It doesn't answer all the things, and it also seems to improve the touchtone decode if you plug something in that decodes touchtones.
Yeah, that's the ATA. Then is the phone company doesn't know anything about creating tones, and it's sending a code to the ATA, and the ATA is generating a tone for your POTS connected thing.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah, but that's not usually what you have at a tower site. You don't have that control usually.
Has any of the remote controller guys got VoIP interfaces for their remote control devices?
Nope. About the closest thing I've done is the CircuitWorks Cycon does have a standard web browser built into it, which works pretty well if you have internet. And of course, the newer Burke items can all be done over the internet. But those are pretty costly. That happens to be what I have at the station I work with right now. They spent $3,800, give or take, on a new remote because it talks over the network to the transmitter. There's none of this raise lower, 5 volts equals 1,000 watt kind of stuff. It's exchanging data with the transmitter, and it's lovely. But it was not cheap.
No stepper relays and raise lower switch.
No, none of that. It's all data packets, and it works very well if you have internet. We extended our LAN out to the tower with a Ubiquity device.
We're actually looking at doing that now to our tower. It's tough to get the internet up there. I've tried, and we've got an older pair of Ubiquities that I'm looking at putting into play.
It's 18 miles and it gets about 40 megabits. Certainly good enough for checking email and stuff. The only thing I don't do, I had this experience, I would be careful putting Wi-Fi at the tower. If the tower is accessible, people will notice it and park outside and leave litter and use your Wi-Fi or try to use your Wi-Fi. We had that happen. You know, the amount of litter just, so we finally just removed the Wi-Fi. I bought
Won't happen at our site. It's too far out.
Okay, I bought a dongle for my iPad so I can just plug a cable into the iPad when I'm there. Because all I do with it is check email basically, or get online to a manufacturer's site when I need assistance or a manual.
Yeah, there used to be a 3.65 gigahertz band that Ubiquiti made radios for, and we used those because they were licensed, and in theory, at least, people were supposed to coordinate those, and that it wasn't on anybody's laptop or phone, so that worked pretty well. We put firewalls between that point to multi-point 3.65 gigahertz network and all the sites, so we had firewalls and we could keep strangers out and all that too.
Yeah, the one we're using is 2 dot. It's 5 gig. It's 5 gig, but it's the unlicensed stuff.
Yeah. The problem with that is that the guy next door jumps on the channel that you happen to be using, and then you're shut out until you get up to your transmitter and change it, or until he stops.
So far, after a number of years, we've not had any issue with it. The tower site is pretty rural. It's not. The nearest farmhouse is about 6 miles away, so that end is okay. There is stuff near the studio end, but it's not dense. It's not a real, highly occupied area. And so far, so good.
Yeah, the FCC took the 3.65 gigahertz band away and didn't replace it with anything, of course.
Let's move on to a sort of allied issue. A lot of folks had set up their remote control or their transmitters or whatever to send alert messages, whether it was from your EAS box or whatever. And if you're involved with Gmail, what's happened? Gmail is demanding a 2-factor authorization, and they're demanding other things that have caused a lot of these systems to break.
Yeah. I found that you got a mail host service from my internet company that specifically is not very secure to accommodate such things. They actually run a service that I can buy for like $5 an account a month. Mm-hmm. And so when my transmitter needs to send a text or an email, that's how it gets out.
Uh-huh.
With the proviso that they tell me I should change the password periodically, and it's not secure. And it's certainly not encrypted either, but to get a short text message out, it works fine.
They have the what am I trying to say here? The workarounds, and different email users operate differently, Outlook or whatever.
Jeff knows.
I'm still on Eudora, and I can no longer send directly through Gmail with Eudora or receive on Eudora. And the only way I can get his Gmail is either to go on the web browser or have it forwarded to me. And they've gone evil.
Yeah, we have.
You tried using an app password?
Sorry, you talked over somebody.
Password?
Sometimes we get too many people going here, and it's like a bad ham radio show. So if you're unsure, you're welcome to raise your hand. There's a little thing down the bottom of your screen that says reactions, I think, there. And is that where it is? Yeah, raise hand. And then I can call on you if you have trouble getting in. Hal, I'll give you one more shot at it.
Sorry about that. I said, have you tried an application-specific password? That is how most things that don't understand what Gmail does is they've put in a thing called, they're requiring on a protocol called OAuth 2. And that sets, I wrote up an article on that, but that sets up a security dialogue between your email client and Gmail. If it doesn't support that, then the alternative is to use an application-specific password. It's a password that they generate that you plug in instead of the normal password that you use to connect your email client or whatever to Gmail that works just with that one client and cannot be reused, but it works pretty flawlessly. I've got an old Windows phone that has no clue how to do any of that stuff. And yet I can continue to get into my Outlook.com account, which does require, the way I've got it set up, two-factor authentication, and as such, OAuth 2 protocol from anything that's going to connect. And using an application-specific password, I can make that a Windows phone connect.
Well, I'll invite you to do us all a favor then. And why don't you type this thing down and give us the cadence of how to get it done, and we'll share it.
I've already done that. I can point you to a web page.
Well, send me an email and I will look. All right. How do you pick up the tower crew?
Barry?
Yes.
Just to let you know, Sage sent out a one sheet a couple of years ago with step-by-step directions how to set up Gmail to work with their encoders and decoders, the Sage Blue boxes that goes through that process. And so it's a PDF you should be able to get off the Sage site. And it works for any of that kind of stuff, not just the Sage.
Do you still have that at hand?
I probably can scrape it up, yes.
Would you send it to me, please? And I will share it around.
Of course.
Thank you. All right. How do you pick a good tower crew? How do you find any tower crew that's going to work? Anyone have some wisdom here?
My general rule for big expensive things I'm going to do is give my perspectives a small inexpensive thing to do. If they screw that up, I get to scratch them off my list, and it takes a little more time than just going and Googling it. But just letting people do their job and seeing how you like what you get and how you like what you get when you ask them questions. And otherwise it's I don't have, unfortunately, the kind of things you get like 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star from some random person on the street is just not very useful.
I guess you could always ask somebody else in the market.
Yep. Somebody that you trust, and you do that.
See what their experience is, because there's all kinds of crews that in the rush to throw up the television rebalancing, the cell systems, 5G, 4G, whatever. There's a lot of guys that joined crews out there, and they've left a lot of damage behind. They've stepped on antennas. They've broken coax to a radio station and just walked away. So it's interesting to try to find a good tower person or company.
I think a Verizon crew tore down our antenna once. That's a crew I'll never hire.
Did you get them to repair what they did?
They had to replace it. They cut it up into little pieces.
Oh, I got a better one than that even. Tim Madeira. My goodness, the story.
Well, it's been an interesting week, let me tell you. Started getting inundated with phone calls from listeners that one of our translators, we have a main frequency and 6 translators, that one of our translators started off getting some static and then disappeared altogether. It was already a backup transmitter. We had been put out for, I actually already ordered a replacement transmitter for it because it was having issues, and I thought it was just a transmitter problem. So I had another transmitter here at the studios that I had to do some work on to get fixed and ready to go up there. I drove up to the tower site, and as I backed in to the door, I thought something looks different, but it didn't register what it was until I got out of the Jeep and started to walk to the door, that my tower was gone, completely cut down. 100-foot tower, not even there anymore, not even anywhere to be seen. Apparently, what had happened, and we are on that site with an agreement with a television station that happened back in 1986. So the television station has subsequently been bought by a media conglomerate in Virginia, who hires a site manager for all their sites across the country, who apparently did a site evaluation and decided there was nothing there. And so they cut the tower down. So that was my last week. And this week, I spent the week trying to get things back up to at least something, which of course is Christmas week. I don't have a regular engineer. I'm the general manager and have been able to this point to handle most of the engineering things myself. But this was, I felt, a little beyond me. Called and talked to two engineers, both of whom said, yeah, one said I'm retiring. The other one said, yeah, I think you can handle this, after he heard my description of what I was planning on doing. And finally got back on the air yesterday on a 20-foot tower using the antenna, which we were able to salvage. Fortunately, our send antenna was not damaged in the bringing down of the tower, or not destroyed, I should say. I was able to make repairs to it and get it back up again. So we're now at 20 feet instead of 100 feet and continuing to broadcast, which our listeners are very grateful for. But now I have the FCC work to do and all the things that go along with that. So I was actually getting ready to take notes on the tower crew thing, because I'm going to have to hire a tower crew to put this up on a different antenna now. So that was my week before Christmas.
That's certainly a jarring situation to have happen. And,
yeah,
you know, Tony Dinkel, I think I mentioned, went down when KFI went off the air a few years ago. And he's getting closer and closer and didn't see the tower. It was a little bit freaked out. A little airplane, private pilot had flown right into it and knocked it open.
Now, the television station was very apologetic, but that was about all they offered me, unfortunately, because there was no written agreement. There was nothing transferred to the new company. You know, I'm kind of stuck.
But you should have your the insurance company, loss of business and everything else should kick in at that point, and they should also help you get the tower back up as quick as possible.
I didn't think about that aspect of it. We are a non-commercial, non-profit, listener supported. So fortunately, we didn't lose any ad revenue, but yeah.
But you should still have, if you're a nonprofit, you're still a business or an organization, and you probably have insurance that will help you. I'm not going to say the obvious misnomer that the insurance company is there to help you. They're not. They're there to be in business. But you can, if you read your policies right, they should help you. I've had issues where transmission line was cut and so forth, and the insurance company actually paid for the loss of business and everything else.
Okay.
All right, Hal, you got your hand up.
Yeah, the link to the article is in chat, and it should also be in an email in your inbox as I speak.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Speaking of towers, stupid human tricks. Got an email from a friend who was out there, and he was climbing a tower. This time of year, sorry, not good. He got so tired, he got up to the top of the tower, and he was panting, and his tongue came out, and do I have to tell you what? Stuck to the tower. He says that's something he doesn't ever want to have happen again. Question came up about Nautel transmitters, power supplies. There are two distinct power supplies that have been delivered with VS transmitters, and I think the NT, is it? And they don't coexist together happily. So
Yeah,
what do you do?
That's true of the new and old versions of the VS power supplies. The original version, which we got because we got serial number 10 VS 2.5, is and you can't buy a new power. The old powers are unobtainium. They don't have the parts. They won't fix them. And but you can't put a new power supply in the old slot mixed with old power supplies. But you can buy a whole new set of new power supplies. They just don't coexist together.
So the question becomes, if you've had to replace these power supplies and you have the old ones sitting somewhere aside, there may be people that will want one. And if you want to put it on the BDR buy sell page, you might find that you can pick up some cash for the old power supplies that still work. Just a suggestion.
With that suggestion out there, Barry, I am looking for the radio receiver card for a Crown FM 30, which was the transmitter that was up there, because that is, as you said, Bill, unobtainium right now as well. And the new cards that they use not compatible with the old translators. So if you have anything laying around like that, I would definitely be interested.
We don't have anybody here that has any of that. Send me an email and we'll post it and send it to the wider audience. Let's see, Bill and Ray are carrying on a conversation here in the chat area. John Van Milligan has a comment about the power supplies A to D. John, comment? No? All right.
Hey, Barry, I found something really interesting this week. There was a BW transmitter on eBay that I was interested in, and he had a whole bunch of them. And I looked at it pretty closely, and he had front view, rear view, power supply was missing. And he listed it as used, and said he had powered it up and inquired, and he didn't have a power supply, and obviously he hadn't tested the unit. And he said, "Do you think I should take it off the market?" And I said, "Yeah, because if you list it as used, people expect it to work." And so I don't know if hopefully nobody on here bought it, but somebody's going to get a transmitter that's not going to have a power supply. I think he got it basically for hauling away part of a radio station. It was, you got to be careful on eBay, but somebody's going to be pretty unhappy when they get that. I think it was a BW 300 V2, pretty popular. He had a 600 watt version, 300 watt version, and the 300 watt V1. And I don't know if any of them had batteries, but he was listing them as used. He got a pretty good price for them.
We're starting to see the number of BW transmitters coming out of service for two reasons. One, maintenance issues, and number two, the company doesn't really exist anymore. There are one or two people out there who will do repairs on the BW transmitters, but it's getting harder and harder to get good service on them. Bill?
I guess there's nobody at the FCC that shops on eBay. So I see all these transmitters on eBay that are like, 100 watt, 1,000 watt transmitters, and they don't claim to have any type certification or, other than, great for parking lot churches and that kind of thing.
Well, I posted a public notice on the BDR FCC Enforcement Watch. They sent a letter out to B&H Photo there in New York, and they were selling 7 different models of transmitters that were unapproved. And the commission essentially said, stop it right now, or you can end up paying us $22K a day.
Yeah, those were pretty low power things designed for use in cars and so on, Bluetooth to RF converters, as opposed to the 100-watt things to cover your parking lot.
Well, here's another fact, if you will. And we're going to, one of these days, not too long, he's been working on it, have a presentation from someone inside the FCC. But the word I get, and I've had it from several sources, is that the FCC acts on complaints these days. There is a web page for consumer complaints. And if you know about a particular transmitter that should not be sold in this country, and you put it on that page, the commission will act. They generally will contact eBay or whoever. The problem becomes with so many Chinese companies, many times they just change the name of the transmitter and they just keep going. But
sounds like a great crowdsourcing project. Just everybody review the site.
Well, yeah.
Yes, FCC seems to act on complaints from the NAB I've seen, but I haven't seen them act on complaints from anyone else.
Well, most people complain on a mailing list or on a web page. They do not complain according to the way the FCC operates. And even I've had conversations with some regional directors, and he says, don't tell me this, put it on to the website, because that's where it will get attention. And then something happened in a particular case on the East Coast. But they're just, the same thing with this business about them wanting Form 1. Well, I think that the problem is, that we're dealing with an agency that broadcasting is probably the smallest part of what it's doing these days. And the NAB does not really focus on the individual stations so much anymore as the consolidators and the TV. Now, you may all have feelings about that. You may all have experiences. But again, if you find something like a illegal transmitter, you got to file a complaint on the FCC website or nothing will happen.
We had a translator in Atlanta shut down. It's been 7 years ago. I think they were using a Chinese transmitter, not certified, and they were creating a lot of spurs. I think that's what killed them on that. And I have used the official FCC complaint, or the to lodge a complaint. It does work. I've done it against two pirate stations before, several years ago, and back then it worked fine. We got a response within 3 or 4 weeks. They shut the pirates down. So.
Now that brings up a very interesting thing. We've talked about LED lights and computers and all the things that spit RFI out that make AM stations much more difficult to serve a market. But the question comes, do you ever call the power company to investigate any of this? What has been your experience? Some power companies are really good.
The ham radio guys spend a lot of time talking to power companies, and sometimes they get responses on some of the blogs I've been reading, but depends on the power company too. How long, whether they actually have a team to go out and find these things. When they start arcing sufficiently that they're starting fires, they care.
Sure. Now, does it matter that you have accumulated some names and phone numbers? Does that help you?
I think it does if you know somebody on that team. But if you're calling into the power company service desk,
oh, yeah,
and you tell them, I have a spur on 1.6 megabit or megahertz, and it's bothering me. I don't know, you're going to get the audible version of a blank stare.
We'll have somebody out there by next Friday between 2 and 4 o'clock.
I had good luck with Xcel Energy in Colorado, and they have, at least at the time, they had one guy that covered the whole state. But I got to ride around with him finding bad lightning arresters and things like that. It did resolve the problems. I'll put a link to my page about that in the chat.
Porky Sarvis says, is the power company a distributor only? Are they a generator only or a generator distributor?
Yeah, there's at least here in Texas, they draw a big difference, a line, if you will, if they're a distributor only of power, if they're a generator only, or if they're a combo, and there's some delineation as if they're a co-op, a cooperative or not. So that's the only reason I asked the questions, Barry, is that could make a difference. I don't know, it might make a difference in other states, but in Texas, that's a big regulatory, a big difference.
Yeah, it became a game here in Arizona. They separated it, and theoretically, Tucson Electric, for instance, generates power, but then there's some other entity that owns the lines now.
The distributes it, yeah.
And they both take their cut of profit.
Yeah, there's also another tier of people that only market power to consumers.
Yeah,
and don't generate it or carry it.
Well, that was the big problem in Texas last year when the cold snap came in. Nobody was responsible.
Well, nobody wants to be responsible here in Texas when something bad happens.
Yeah, they just buy an airline ticket to someplace south and sunny.
Yeah, we've had that happen. We got documented pictures of politicians doing
that. Hey, Barry, there's a pretty good book by the ARRL on curing RFI interference. I guess that's 300 pages or so. I read it, and the guy goes around with a phone with the power companies. He has his own little, set in his car to go around tracking RFI, and I don't know. It's a pretty good book. You might be interested.
Again, this comes to my way of thinking into the community situation. First of all, you want to know that the community is interested in this RFI problem in this particular case. And maybe somebody at another station has already started to deal with it. So we need to communicate. Maybe there's one guy in the whole state, as was mentioned by Harold, I think, in Denver, in Colorado, that is assigned this. But he has the ability, once he knows about a situation, to muster some techs in other areas. And so we need to find out who these key folks are and politely let them know when there's a problem. The implications of the fact that Part 15 has been ignored, and certainly the LED traffic lights, we may have destroyed AM radio by not responding.
Yeah, if they wanted to revitalize AM, they would revitalize the regulatory bodies that check out consumer devices. You can't use, anything that you get that some manufacturer wants to sell you that won't pass muster just mails you a set of toroids to put on the lamp cord, and that may solve your problem, but if your neighbor doesn't put their toroids on their lamp cord, you got the same problem.
I have seen that the FCC has gone after people with noisy neon signs and things like that. Again, it is all complaint driven. I wonder, we hear about non-compliant equipment, and I wonder how much non-compliant equipment there really is. I think ARRL has done some retesting of stuff, but I don't know if they specifically find that they did not comply with Part 15. Anyway, Part 15 compliance, should be enforced, and if we find something not that complaint form is appropriate.
Well, the other problem is that you've got different noise levels for different environments, and if you manufacture something that's for use in an industrial environment, and you take it and you put it in a consumer environment, in theory, the noise regulation changes, and in practice, anybody can buy anything for anything, and the FCC has no way of controlling what the kind of devices are used in what kind of environments.
Yeah, that's the Class A versus Class B, whereas Class B is residential and Class A is an industrial. And I think that if there is a Class A device in a residential area, the FCC would tell them to turn it off.
Yes, we see that periodically. We see a public notice or a notice of violation that is issued for a particular company. Sometimes it's, I think the last one that I remember reading had to do with a company in Texas where they installed a transmitter to block the cell phones of their employees so they would work and not watch TikTok. Or
the FCC does not like cell phone jamming at all.
No, they don't. I've seen NOVs of a guy driving through the DC area, wiping out radios and people who are talking on their cell phones. Again, the commission doesn't like it, even though it's dangerous for many of these people who talk and don't pay attention to the road. But again, it's got to be complaint driven. People have got to let the commission know, because it isn't going to come from the commission just because we think it should be. They do not reach out. I mean, we can start talking about EAS in that respect as well. They issue edicts and they sit back and watch to see what we're going to do, but they don't really work with us.
Well, the trouble with Class A and Class B devices is that the Home Depots and hardware stores sell the Class A devices because they're cheaper, and most of the stores don't know the difference, and people buy them and install them, and they're just everywhere then.
Mm-hmm.
Recently in our area also, somebody had a lot of problems with radiation from a DSL uplink, taking out a large portion of HF. And he's talked with the phone company. I don't know if they did, in fact, track it down to a particular DSLAM, but I don't know that they've done anything about it. It was caught by just looking at the spectrum on a spectrum analyzer. It matched the uplink spectrum exactly.
Well, again, very often these things require some persistence on the part of the engineering community. I'll turn to EAS for just a moment. And what a lot of folks have been upset about recently was the comment about security, which, as Bill Robertson came on to tell us, was an old unit run by a hacker who wanted to make a name for himself. If you have a DASDEC that's 4.1 or later, none of that applies. And if you have, I think 4.4, maybe 4.1 as well, you can already do the monitor CAP for audio ahead of your LPs. The only thing that the DASDEC won't do right now, and it's coming soon, is changing the wording for the EAN, which there's 3 or 4 of them that they've come up with new names for the name of the alert. But as far as going back to the commission and asking, Part 11, we've been promised a rewrite for 10 years now. In fact, I wonder.
I mean, it goes back, if the only people you have working for you are politicians and lawyers, and they famously don't want advice from engineers because they know everything already. Then you get stuff like those first national tests we did. None of it was audible. You get regulations that don't make any sense. They're incoherent and all over the map. And you get people that when you tell them, hey, there's this problem, they say it's not a problem. It's right here in the regulation.
Yes, you have to notify the commission within 72 hours if there's been a problem. That's what they've come up with. But as far as the rewrite, to get rid of the things in Part 11 that don't make any sense anymore, and to give clarity to, well, the word immediately, where it says you must immediately retransmit an EAN. Does that mean you have to wait for it to end and retransmit, or does it mean that you have to stop what you're doing and go live? Or what about the first 10 seconds when you find out about it, or something like that? I discovered that I put this page up, and some of you are going to laugh, I'm sure. I'd forgotten about it. This is 5 years ago or something that I put this thing up.
Can you put one of those up for the next translator window too, Barry? I'd like to see that. I'm sure it's more than 10. It's probably more than 15 years.
Oh yeah, promises from the commission. Well, again, this is where the NAB is supposed to come into play, or with the EAS if there's a problem, and there are EAS boxes out there connected directly to the internet. There are those that are still running old versions of software that do not even connect to the IPAWS server. Maybe there should be an effort by the SBE chapters to reach out and help those small stations, most of them being small stations in their areas, to identify these things and fix them without a huge cost. And upcoming, you are going to have to update your Sage boxes, and you could probably expect another $400, $500 update for each box. And the question with the DASDEX is going to be what they're going to do about the updates for the name change to the alerts, if that's going to trigger a full update, or whether they'll do that one without extra cost. And I don't know the answer to that yet.
You've seen that Senator Markley wants to revitalize AM some more.
Oh yes,
and the reason he wants to do this is because AM provides all these services to rural America, and despite the fact that not to step on any particular toes, but all the big conglomerates that the NAB cares about are carrying the same guy in the same from one studio someplace all the way across the country, and you couldn't get a local related message in edgewise.
Yeah. Oh, we're over an hour now, and we're starting to have a few people that have to leave. But I'll raise this question. You've seen an AM tower, and you've generally seen the feed line go through a circular effect before it hooks to the tower, haven't you? Have you ever done that with FM?
Yeah, I think Nautel recommends it.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't the purpose just to create a choke for lightning? I guess. I guess on FM we're just using isolators. I mean, I clamp on isolators now, or ferrites. Jeff would not be proud, but yeah, just ferrites, just to make a fairly high impedance for the lightning to come across the outer conductor. So cheap thing to do.
I didn't know what it was for. I did it just because when I just did our fix, but I didn't realize what it was for. We always called it a drip loop. I thought that was what it was for.
Maybe for tower vibrations too, possibly. I don't know. In some
Well,
cases,
it's pretty interesting. If you look at the if you ever seen one of these like lightning strike indicators, it's like a one of those solenoid counters, and they put them at the base of towers, and you go up about 2 or 3 feet, and you put one side of the counter coil, and you put the other side of the counter coil at the ground rod next to the tower, and there's enough inductance in that 2 or 3 feet of tower to create enough voltage to snap that counter over.
Of course, the first thing that you find those coils for was for lighting, for the 60 hertz AC going up to the lights, and it wasn't really a change reactance issue, but the whole idea of the rising pulse of lightning and getting into the building. So this is why both AM and FM tend to do this in lightning-prone areas. I'm wondering if anyone has a question that they haven't had a chance to ask, they'd like to ask, a problem that they have, piece of gear they'd like to put in the dumpster, but don't know what to do. Well,
yeah, I just moved 9 months ago. I had a whole supersized dumpster full of stuff like that.
You're brave. I'm the world's worst pack rat, Bill. So. Years. And sometimes I can even find things.
We have a room here at the station my staff likes to call the dead equipment room. I prefer to call it the engineering room, but it's saved myself many times.
Oh yeah.
I can predict the part I will need by the things I throw away, because the part I will need is always in the things I throw away.
My day job, they have this 5S and all these fads that they follow, and if something hasn't been used in a year, they'll throw it out. And invariably, at least every other week, I have to bring something in. Somebody will run a test and they can't get a part. It doesn't matter if it's coax, connectors, cables, whatever, test equipment. I have to bring it in. So, glad to do that.
You can always buy it back on eBay.
They won't buy anything on eBay. It has to be brand new. It's just, I don't know. I don't get that. They'll spend $500,000 on a network analyzer and not think twice about it.
So you don't work for a non-commercial station, then I take it.
That's my night job. No, during the day I work for a big aerospace company. It's amazing. Then they complain about cost. So,
yeah, Barry will have to open a whole nother conference room for FAA complaints. I've got some of those too. They have the same problem. They fired all their engineers and they just kept the lawyers and politicians.
Yeah. Every so often somebody laments that the last engineer that was at the FCC was retired about 15 years ago. I know Phil Kane used to point out there was, I think, 1997, that they offered early retirement to the tech folks, and like 90% of them took it. They lost a lot of talent.
Wasn't there a FCC office or monitoring station in Douglas, Arizona, or somewhere near there? And is it still there?
Still there, automated.
or operated by remote control from Washington.
Yep.
Yeah, there used to be FCC field engineers kind of in every wide spot on every highway in America. And now I think there's somebody in Seattle that covers the 9 states of the Northwest or something like that.
It's worse than that. There's now only 3 regional directors. There used to be a dozen.
Yeah, I'm from Douglas, and there's I knew the guy that ran it. I went to school, John Glenn.
Yeah,
at
nice
that time, and I went to school with all of his kids.
Problem with that is that John
daughter-
loved rock and roll on the 580 station, 5 kilowatts at 580. And so he listened to it all the time. And every time they missed the ID plus or minus 2 minutes, he'd cite them.
Yeah, we've got an AM here. I guess somebody just bought an AM that was dead and put it back up again, but they have yet to have to put on a legal ID.
Oh my. And this goes also to stations that lose their internet connection and they go silent for 5 hours, 10 hours, 4 days, 5 days. Don't turn their transmitter off.
I know one translator that's been doing that for 2.5 years now. It's amazing. I mean, there's no enforcement. We were talking with some broadcast engineers. I mean, the translators are just running wide open. You know, whatever the output powers of the translator, that's what they run. And I know stations that have taken down their translators. They've taken down their primary stations, and a host of people that have gone silent. There's no FCC notification. I don't know. It's pretty amazing. I think it's because there's just no enforcement. People know.
Well, again, remember, they were forbidden for the last 2 years to go out of their office. They were forbidden to do any road work unless there was an imminent, disastrous interference problem.
And again, it's probably complaint driven, as
Exactly.
mentioned before. I think there are also daytime stations that just stop their audio at sunset with the carrier up.
There are a few, and there is a class 4, I think, what we used to call class 4. It's now what, class 3? Up in Massachusetts that throws dead air lots. But Ray, until you fill out the form, that translator will still be pumping dead air.
I mean, I don't have a dog in the hunt in these other stations. Now, if they get on our frequency, we got another matter. So anyway. And,
well, that's true to a degree. And yeah, there's a lot of FMs out there where they've adjusted the power meter or the voltmeter for indirect power, and they're running anywhere from 10% to 100% over their limit.
Now, if the FCC, instead of raising our license renewal rates, if they would give us stipends for doing all the engineering they're not doing, that might work.
It's a real problem for the whole industry.
It's interesting that fines don't go back to the FCC, they go back to the Treasury. I think that there's probably good reason for that. You have counties where the sheriff sets up a speed trap or something just to raise money, but they do not get the money from fines.
And poor people that drive around a speed trap on their way to buy a car or a house, and they happen to have substantial cash in their car, it usually is confiscated by the local county, and getting it back out is sometimes very, very difficult.
There's a philosophical angle to this, of course, is that regulations and laws and that kind of thing, they're for people who don't understand right from wrong. They're there because if it wasn't illegal, it would be a priori right in their minds. The other thing is that laws and regulations should be there to solve a problem, not just because. And the fines, such as they are should be to compensate those who have lost from violation of the law. But there are when legislators write laws, they write them to make them easy to enforce, or they make them because that's what their constituents wanted them to be, not necessarily to correct a situation or or punish appropriately punish the wrongdoer.
Well, the current one here about making every station develop a written policy for cybersecurity, demonstrate that they're following it, and report every year. Doesn't that seem more like a paper chase to you than anything that's actually going to help the industry?
Well, yeah, and especially since when the FCC comes out and decides to create an EAS system based on computers, and then doesn't publish any kind of, as far as I know, cryptographic analysis of whether that's a safe thing to do. They have access to agencies they could use for that, but there again, the lawyers and politicians know more than anybody else. So why would they take a cryptanalyst advice about something like that?
There's one phrase that explains a lot of what the FCC does, and it explains where the complaints, whatever you commented earlier, Bill, and others about translators and LPFM, it's called one size fits all. Doesn't matter. You have mileage for what? Mileage for translators and coverage for LPFMs, or is it vice versa? That's why they don't match. They don't work together well, and the commission has never dealt with that. The NAD 27 and NAD 83 issue is still out there. Do you know which coordinates you really have, and who knows what those coordinates mean?
Does matter.
Yes, it does.
I think it is really difficult to keep building on something without starting over again. We've got sort of the Winchester Mystery House here, where the Communications Act of 1934, and it's modified a little bit here, modified a little bit there, and it just becomes very complicated and difficult to maintain.
Yep.
It was all written in a time when computers were people at desks with a adding machine.
Yeah, so I'm not super familiar with the security requirement. Is this largely with regard to EAS, or are they also requiring security measures to make sure your automation is not taken over, et cetera?
It's part of an EAS NPRM. But
so it seems like that should be. Yeah, it seems like that should just be a requirement on the approval of the equipment and handled entirely by the manufacturer.
Well, one of the questions that we had was whether the manufacturers should develop equipment that it's built in VPN or built in, but that's going to raise the price. And what about the units that are out there in the field now? Are they going to have to be updated, and how much would that cost? There is no, again, I hate to repeat myself, but the PSHSB they don't understand what's going on in the field.
Yeah, the kind of cryptography that it would take to encode and decode the preamble so that people couldn't break into my internet connection and put up an EAS alert that Russia has launched missiles on New York City and they'll be there in 20 minutes. you know, it's just, it is, they just don't take any care when they write things. If they want to manufacture something, they have the option to say, this is how we want this thing to behave, or here's a piece of code that does this, or here's a block diagram for that piece of code, and you implement it the way you want, but here's how we're going to test it. But they don't do any of that. They just say, well, gosh, we
I don't
can't
know.
take responsibility for that.
Bill, have you been around for 10 years? That's what they did in 2012. They obsoleted all the ES gear because they said, this is what we want for security. Then the FEMA spent the last 10 years changing things periodically without conferencing with the manufacturers.
Well, they said they wanted to upgrade security, which to them meant, gosh, if we can take it off just being broadcast and put it on the internet where it's safe, they had no clue. 10 years ago, the internet had been operating for 20 years. It's not like there was any secrets about how insecure and how easy it was to hack.
Very similar.
It's just they didn't ask anybody.
Very similar situation with AM stereo, because Ubiquity or whatever they're called today, they kept changing the rules in the coding, so that companies like Radiosophy and what was the Boston State, every time they'd build a radio, the code would change and they'd have to rebuild, and it put them out of business. That's why AM stereo died. HD AM stereo, excuse me.
But this is a what is it? The establishment clause. Mm-hmm. If you're going to establish somebody as the state sponsored something, then the state needs to have some regulatory input into how this is done, and it behooves the state at that point to take due care that they don't run all these manufacturers around the post, to say nothing of all the users around the post.
Well, I think we could sit here and spend hours talking about all the things that the FCC does that we don't like, or the FEMA. I actually had a FEMA administrator ask me one time with a serious face, you don't think there's anyone out there that doesn't have broadband internet at their station?
Yeah, clueless is what they are. It is. I sit in an office in downtown Manhattan, and I look around the room. Everybody's got broadband.
So in a lot of situations, there's sort of a grandfather clause and they just wait for the old equipment to die and standards apply to new equipment. What is the oldest, or how old is the oldest EAS equipment that's currently online, and how long is it expected to last?
12 years.
Well, everything that was valid today came after 2012. And worse than that, everything that's valid today really came after, what, August of 2021?
And can everything be handled by software updates at this time, or are there hardware issues?
I think for most of it's a software issue. I know Harold ran out of space, out of RAM in his Sage. That's one of the reasons the newer generation, the Blueface Sage, came out. But the problem is more one of manpower than anything else. because as anything else in OS or whatever, to set your engineering staff to rewriting the firmware for EAS is a very expensive proposition. And if you have a company like Sage or DASDEC, and they have thousands of units out in the field, and they're not going to sell thousands more, how do you support this? How do you pay the engineers to write the software?
I remember DASDEC said that they were only going to provide software to upgrade the 64-bit processors. And some of the units, it's hard to tell whether they have the 32-bit processors or 64-bit. But if you're stuck with a 32, it's not upgradable. So I've checked, and fortunately ours was a 64. So, it's cheap. It's $400 or $500 every time they do a major revision. I know they just rolled out version 5. That's not chump change for a small station.
No, that's the point. That's the point I'm getting at. And if you have a small cluster of, say, 6 stations in a small market, that could be several $1,000s. A lot of stations got smart. They started running one EAS box to feed their whole cluster.
The government used to, when they had something that they truly cared about and wanted done right, would publish a prototype model of something. So essentially, you take a processor card that you could buy from anybody, or a Raspberry Pi or anything, and you put this software on it, and all of a sudden it's this kind of thing that meets all of the qualifications they want met. And in a boutique market, like anything you buy for a broadcast station, I mean, it's not a commodity. It's not a consumer product. You're not going to get the kind of payback on your engineering dollars, which is why the A costs so much more than a PC, even though the hardware is the same.
It's one reason why Continental doesn't do support except 8 to 5 anymore, because they're being asked to support transmitters that are nearly 50 years old. Now,
and they changed that model, Barry. So they said, well, hey, I got a great idea. Why don't we take out all the how's it work sections of the manual, and how to figure out what's wrong with it sections of the manual, and the parts list in the manual, because we want to keep that to ourselves. But on the other hand, we don't want to support it either. So
no, the issue is the people that run stations now, where a sales manager will go out and try to repair a transmitter or a program. The liability has become dramatically higher, insurance rates dramatically higher, and Continental they felt they couldn't support that. Gates Air, their solution was simply to refuse support for certain run SX transmitters, the MW transmitters. You can't get support anymore. You can barely get, an old schematic from them, or Harold or me, depending upon which model it is. But if Harold sat there, or somebody else, and coded a brand new EAS on a computer, so all you had to do was plug in a radio feed and output audio, how many of those could you sell?
I wonder if that could even be done as an open source project. And then also back on support, there's one of the manufacturers in the cinema industry will not answer the phone unless you have bought their extended warranty.
Several automation systems are that way right now. And I fielded a call from one station 2 weeks ago that wanted to know if they had to pay the yearly support fee, which they've been paying for 10 years and never used. And I said, well, if you're going to stay with this software on this computer and it doesn't have a problem, you might consider it. But if you need help, they're not going to help you. I remember when they tried back in the mid-'80s, they tried to recruit techs to be around the clock to take calls from anybody and charge them on a credit card. And the problem is Nobody wanted to pay for support. So either you get dragooned into it where they won't talk to you, or you pay at the front end or the back end somewhere.
It does cost, so it's reasonable to charge somewhere.
There's an argument to be made that if you let the station manager and sales manager do transmitter maintenance, that it may get them out of the gene pool.
Then the herd? Yeah, I suppose that that could bring a smile to some face.
And think of all the money that they saved on engineers.
Harold, on your TRS-80 project, let's say, did you come to a point where it wasn't financially feasible to support it anymore?
You think in the TEL-171, the adapter for the Mosley?
Yeah.
Basically, we just stopped getting calls. So either they are still working, or I suspect the remote control has been replaced since it's now been like 50 years.
Oh, yeah. No. I mean, was there a point during manufacture that you found that support was eating up your cash flow?
No, not at all. That wasn't really a problem. We had, our production techs could answer the calls and talk people through things.
I haven't seen one of those still operating in a long time.
Yeah, I've got one on the shelf here.
I'm sure you do. I did find the manual for it.
Yeah, very good. The past 20 years or so, I've worked on cinema equipment, and the problem that we have there is parts going end of life, and so you really can't support the product anymore. There is a product I started designing in 2010 that it now has a new company with the rights to it, so I'm helping them with support for that. And there are some parts that are end of life in there, so I don't know what's going to happen on
that. Isn't it all owned by Dolby now? Do Re Mi, and was bought by Dolby, and it's all cinema package is all one company now, pretty much.
Yeah, Dolby bought Do Re Mi and then dropped their own products. There's still GDC, and Sony dropped out. I think of who else. Christie is still in it. Barco is still in it. A company in India is still in it. I was with Ultra Stereo Labs, and then we were bought by QSC, and QSC just dropped their cinema division in 2020, which is when I retired.